Hello everyone, and thank you guys so much for joining me in this second episode of the Vue Pomodoro tutorial. Now in the previous episode, we have all the elements set up, the CSS, and we've got the button and the animations working, but the only problem we had was that when the animation stopped, the timer stopped at 1 second instead of 0. If you guys remember in the previous episode, I asked you guys to try and figure out a solution to this problem. And if you guys did and you guys managed to solve it, great job. You guys deserve a round of applause. You guys deserve a pat on the back. But if you guys haven't tried, feel free to pause this video and try it out for yourself. But if you already did, or you just couldn't figure out the solution, well now I'm here to guide you. Okay, so before we jump into the code, we're going to try to solve at least 4 things today. The first thing is to fix this bug. The second is to add the sound effects when the timer hits 0. The third thing is to go to the next segment. And the fourth is to add a rest timer countdown. Okay, so now let's jump straight into the code and try to fix the 1 second remaining bug. So if you guys try to trace the code, you'd realize that this onFinish call, which actually runs the clear interval and removes the interval to -1 second, it's actually being called right before the final 1 second deduction. And the way you can solve this in simple terms is just to add a fraction of a second into the path options. So what you can do is just say plus 0.5. So remember that we are taking the Pomodoro duration, which is actually already the current time in seconds. And now we're just adding 0.5 seconds, or you can think of it as 500 milliseconds. So if you guys don't want to do that in this bracket, what you can do is erase this and just say plus 500 right here, and make sure that you just arrange everything really neatly and nicely. And this is basically the same as this one. So let's save it and let's try to run it again. Let's see if it actually works. So let's hit start. So it's gonna count down, and basically what's gonna happen is that we're gonna hit 0 and then the timer runs out. So that's the easy way to fix this bug. And honestly, I think that's the way that you should do it. But if you guys have a better suggestion, feel free to let me know in the comments below. But I think this is the simplest way, by all means, to fix this problem. So yeah, we have successfully checked off one item from our list. Okay, so the second item on our list is to add the sound effect. And the way you can do that is by going to my GitHub repo, go into source, into assets, and you're going to click on beep.mp3 and you're going to click download. And this is going to download the sound effect for the beeping sound that will play when the timer hits 0. So all you need to do is open this up in Finder. So here I have it in my downloads folder, and you're going to open up VS Code. And what you're going to do is basically just drag and drop this into the assets folder. Now, if you're on Windows, just find your downloads folder and then just drag it in. It's the same process. Now, what I'm going to do is just rename this into something like beep.mp3 because I don't want to type the whole name. And I'm going to close this. And then we can import it inside our home.vue. So the way we do that is really simple. All we say is import beep from, and we're going to open up the double quotes, /assets/beep.mp3. And that's all you need to do to import this sound effect into our project. Now, if this is your first time using an audio asset in JavaScript, all you need to do is actually create an audio object using this mp3 file. So what we're going to do is we're going to say beep audio is equal to a new audio, and we're going to pass in beep. And it's that simple. Now, the way that we play this audio is right down here on finish. What we're going to do is we're going to say this.beep audio dot play, and that's a function. So when we save it right now and we go back into our project, and let's just close this and let's hit start. And when the timer hits 0, you should hear the beep audio play. Awesome, so it's working right now. I hope the audio file is not too loud for you guys. I've intentionally made it extra loud just in case if you guys want to like dial it down a bit. But yeah, feel free to edit it based on your liking. So now we have the sound effect added in, and that's the second thing checked off our list. So yeah, I promised you guys that we're gonna move quite fast this time, and we've already got 2 things checked off our list in like what, 5 minutes? Okay, so the third thing is to make sure that we can go to the next segment, because right now it's always stuck at the first segment, right? And then when we refresh, we start at the first one again. So how do we go to the next segment? So in our onFinish function, what we're gonna do is we're gonna say, just right under the clear interval, we're gonna say, if current segment is less than 4, we're gonna say this dot current segment plus equal 1. So this is basically gonna go from 1, 2, 3, and 3 is still less than 4, so it's gonna plus equal 1, so it's gonna be 4. And then when it's 4, we're gonna reset the current segment back to 1. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward, right? So now let's try to run this. So we're gonna hit start, and this timer is gonna go down for 6 seconds, but in reality it's gonna be 25, but just for testing, it's gonna be 6. The timer is gonna beep, and you realize that nothing's really happening, and that's because we are not resetting this timer, and also we are not changing this button back to start. So what should we do? So perhaps you can change the button text right here, right after the play. So we're gonna say this dot button text is equal to start. Now let's save that, and let's add another line where we're gonna say this dot current time in seconds, and we're basically gonna reset it back to the Pomodoro duration. So the way we do that is just say this dot Pomodoro duration. Okay, now let's save that and let's run it again. So we're gonna hit start, it's gonna count down. Now when it hits 0, you realize that it says, well, AN or something like that. This is basically just trying to tell you that it is not a number. So that's because we did not declare Pomodoro duration within the return function. We declared it up here, but this can only be used within this return section, and outside here in our code, we can only use anything within the return section. So what we need to say right here is just Pomodoro duration, Pomodoro, duration. Now if we save and go back, this should work this time. There you go. So the timer jumped straight away back to 6 seconds, which is the Pomodoro duration. But in my opinion, I think that it should actually stay as 0 until the end of the beeping sound. Because that makes more sense, right? Imagine if you're working and then suddenly you hear a beep and then you go back to this tab and then suddenly you saw it's back to like 6 seconds. And that doesn't really make sense. It would make more sense if it stays at 0. So when you're back here, you can hear the sound effect, but at the same time, you can see a visual feedback that is at 0, or the time ran out. So I've already timed the sound effect and it takes about 4 seconds. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna wait for like 4.5 seconds before we run this code. And the way we do that is with set timeout. So up here, we use set interval, and set interval basically runs the code every, 1 second in this instance. But set timeout only runs once at the end of the time that we have set. So the way we do that is just say set timeout, and this is going to take a function, and within this function we're going to paste all of this, and we're going to set the time as 4.5 seconds or 4,500 milliseconds. So let's save that, and again we're going to hear the beeping sound. So we're going to start the timer and it's going to go down. There you go. So once the beeping sound ended, then the timer resets back to the Pomodoro duration. Now, in my opinion, I think this looks way better. What do you guys think? Awesome. So right now it's reset back to start. Let's see what happens when we click the button again. Now, when we click start, it starts from the second segment instead of the first. Okay, so I'm just gonna mute this for a second just so that I can talk over this period. But basically we've achieved our goal of changing the current segment. So you can see that it's going all the way till the end, and now there's the beep, but I've already muted the site. And right now, if we click start, we're gonna go all the way till the very end. So at least we have this whole flow working, right? We can go from the start all the way till the end. But right now you realize that it kind of just stays there, and if you hit start, nothing really happens, and that's because we have not reset the progress bars. So let's not worry about that for now. Let's save that for the next episode. But we have successfully completed the third item on our list, which is to make sure that we can go on to the next segments. So for the fourth item on our list is to add the rest duration. So the way we can create a rest timer is actually pretty simple. All we can do is just reuse the current time in seconds, but since we have a Pomodoro duration here, we might as well create a rest duration. So we do not need to create an additional timer. We just need to make sure that when the timer finishes, we replace it with the rest duration instead of the Pomodoro duration. So the rest duration is 5 minutes times 60 seconds. Okay, so means that in the actual final product, we're going to make sure that the Pomodoro duration lasts for 25 minutes and the rest duration lasts for 5 minutes. But for testing, let's just make this 6 seconds and let's make this 3 seconds. Okay, let's save this. Let's go back all the way down here. And instead of saying this dot Pomodoro duration, let's change this to rest duration. Now hit save, go back here. Let's hit start. And once the timer runs out, it should beep and then change to the 3 seconds, which is the rest duration. Okay, so we have our rest timer kinda in place right now. It's not counting down yet, but if you realize from our previous design, we wanted to add the word rest on top just so that the users know that we're resting and this timer is counting down, but this bar doesn't actually move. So the way we can do that is with a very cool method called VIF. So if we open up our timer and we scroll all the way down here to our time display, what we can do is we can actually put this inside another div. So let's call this div time display. Let's put it in here and let's just make sure. Okay, so we've used hyphens, so we might as well just use hyphens right here in our class name. So this is just to make sure that everything is in the same format and we do not like mess things up. Awesome. So now we have the time display. What we can do is we can use VIF to show when we are resting. So let's just create a p tag and let's use the word rest. And we're going to say VIF. So this means that it's only going to show if we are resting. Now we haven't defined resting anywhere in our code yet. So let's just create it right here. So we're going to say resting. and it has to be a Boolean, and currently it's going to be false because right at the start we don't want to rest, we want to start our session, and only at the end of the session we want to go into the resting phase. So what we can do right now is right down here we can change this dot resting equals true. Okay, so now if we go back here and we hit start, after the timer has hit 0 and the audio has played, you can see the word rest show up. But obviously this is not properly styled yet, so let's fix the CSS. So we're going to go down here under our style tag, and we're going to create a CSS for time display, and we're going to say position absolute, top 50%, left 50%, transform translate minus 50% minus 50%. I'm going to say display flex direction column, align items, not align content, align items center, and justify content center. Okay. Now if we go up here into our h2 tag, you're going to realize that it's almost the same as what we have here. And that's because instead of just having the h2 tag in the center, we want to make sure now that the time display is in the center. So let me just cut this and bring it all the way down here just so that you guys can see it clearer. What we can do is just erase everything that is repeated, because now we want the container to be the one that's in the center and not the h2 tag. Now we can style our p tag. So we're going to say font size 48 pixels, line height 48 pixels, text align center, and then color, we're going to make it have a color of hashtag FF8080. Now let's save this, and if you go back here, you're going to see that the rest word immediately shows up, and that's because we haven't hit refresh. So when we're actually running the session, that word is going to be hidden, it's not going to show. That's because the if state is in the false state, because resting is false right now. But when we hit start and we go all the way till the end, and once the beeping has run out, it's gonna show the actual rest timer. There you go. So I think that maybe we can have the resting equals true happen right before the set timeout, just so that when the timer actually runs out, we're gonna see the word rest with 0, 0. And I think this makes more sense, but it's really up to you guys, whether you prefer it to look like this or you prefer it to only show once the timer resets back to 0. So yeah, do what you guys like. Awesome, so we've fixed the timer bug where it doesn't hit 0. We've added a sound effect when the progress bar hits the end. We've made sure that we can go on to the next segment, and we've added a rest time, although it's not a timer yet. But before we actually make it into a timer, I just want to create the pause and resume functionality for our progress bar. Now if you realize, when we hit start and we hit pause, it doesn't actually work. You can see that it's actually breaking the entire app. And that's because when we hit pause and resume, it's getting kind of confused. We haven't added the functions and methods to handle it yet. So let's just do it right now before, we make our entire app crash. So I'm just going to refresh just so that that thing goes away. And we're going to go back into VS Code. And what we're going to do is create another function right under the animate bar. Let's just call it pause bar. Okay. In here, what we want to do is we want to stop all the animations and we want to clear the interval. So let's just start with clear interval. And this is going to be exactly the same as the one right below it, right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to say switch this dot current segment, and if it's 1, we're going to stop the top right animation. And then we're going to say break, and then case 2, this dot bottom right dot stop, and then we're going to say break. And then for case 3, this dot bottom left dot stop, break. Gotta stop with the typos. And then finally case 4, this is gonna be top left, and we're gonna stop that animation as well, and finally break. Okay, let's save it and let's try to run this thing. So let's start and let's make it go halfway, and then when we hit pause, okay, we forgot to add it right here. If it's pause, we're gonna say this dot pause bar. My bad on that. Okay, let's start it again and let's make it go halfway down to 3 seconds, and let's hit pause. There you go, it paused. But if you realize, it actually jumped into the rest section. And that's because every time we stop the animation, the on finish is actually being called. So what we want to do is we want to just wrap this whole thing and make sure that this is only going to run if the current time in seconds is less than or equals to 0. And that's when we want to clear the interval and change the current segment to the next and play the beeping sound. So let's save that again and let's try it. So we're gonna go and let it run for about half and then hit pause, and it works. So we are paused right now, and when we hit resume, you realize that it starts again, but it's not taking 3 seconds to reach the end. It's actually taking exactly 6 seconds again to reach the end. So if you realize just now it was -3, so it went from 3 all the way down to -3, which is technically 6 seconds. And that's because Progressbar.JS doesn't have a pause function. It has a stop function, and when we call animate again, it's actually using what we passed in here, where this .path options is the Pomodoro duration, which is 6 seconds in this instance. So in simple terms, it's actually just restarting the entire animation from where we left off for 6 seconds, when in actual fact it should have been 3. So I want you guys to think about how we can solve this problem. It's actually pretty simple, but in the next video, I'll show you guys how to do it. So again, this is going to be your homework. You're going to figure out how to solve the pause and resume animation. And for now, this is going to be it for part 2. So I promise you guys that this is going to be way quicker. And in part 3, we're going to finish everything up. So we're going to have the pause and resume animation. We're going to have the rest timer count down properly. And we're going to have a nice confetti effect right at the end when we finish everything, and make sure that it restarts so that we can start our new Pomodoro sessions again. So this is it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this episode, leave it a like. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. So this is the coding construct, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care.